Welcome to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
And my name's Mick. I'm also an alcoholic and serving as joint secretaries. Please join us in a moment's silence to remember still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside this meeting.
And Carol is going to read the preamble for this.
Good evening, my name's Carol and I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And a very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's it, guys. That's the introduction done. We've, this is the old timers meeting, and our speaker today is OK Jackson, calling in from Portugal. You have 40 to 50 minutes, okay, to share. And the floor is yours. And thanks a million for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for unmuting me. I'm never sure quite what to do. I'm OK J. I am an alcoholic. Very, very grateful to be here tonight and starting off the new year right with a share. I want to thank Mossy for sending out that nice information mail out yesterday. He gave my sobriety date, which is 9/11/1981. People ask me how I got to be an old timer. I tell them I didn't die, and I go to a lot of meetings, and that's a part of the secret. I'll tell you the rest of it as I talk tonight. I very old school. How it was, what happened and what it's like now. That's kind of the message for the evening. But before I get into all that, I just have to say something that has been on my mind lately about old people, because society in general sort of turns you invisible the older you get. If you get in their way in the airport, they might pay attention to you, but that's about it. You're just sort of invisible in society. And there are a lot of old people who are very lonely, sitting in their houses with a television set, can't even afford a vet bill anymore, so they don't have pets. They've lost the people that were important to them in their lives, their parents and many of their friends, and it's a very sad situation. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, old people, old timers, people who've been around a while are revered, not necessarily deservedly so either. But we get a lot of attention and we get a lot of appreciation and we get a lot of love. And yeah, we lose people, just like everybody else. Life happens, and so does death. And I've lost a lot of good friends this past decade because they're all dropping off the perch, and eventually I will do the same. But the nice thing about being in this program is that I do make new friends all the time, and they're valuable to me too, in a different way. But by gosh, they're important in my life, and I love every one of them. I see a lot of them right here in these squares tonight. So the reason old people, old timers, are revered in Alcoholics Anonymous is because when we get to this program, we are stuffed with fear. I went to my first and most lasting meeting in September of 1981, and I left that meeting worried if I would be able to stay sober on Christmas. Way up ahead, living up ahead with that fear. And then it was, will I be able to stay sober through my birthday? Will I be able to stay sober, if this happens or that happens, or God forbid, if something happened to one of my kids? And, all of those fear that this program, thank God, has removed from me one by one over the years. But the value of being around here for a while is that when I had those fears early on, I would see people get through Christmas sober. Lots of Christmases, they would say, or New Year's, or a birthday, or the death of a parent, or even the death of a child, or the murder of a friend, or all those terrible things that can happen, and all the wonderful things that can happen that we used to drink over. Woohoo, I got a promotion, doink. That's the value of people who've been around here a while, because we know, I certainly know, that there is nothing that can happen in my life that taking a drink will not make a hell of a lot worse. And that's true of all of us. That's true of all of us. So I'm grateful to be an old timer. And I play the old card all the time because it's a very valuable card. I get a lot of benefits from it. And I will now tell you how it was. People think I'm a nice old person, and I am a nice old person, but I was not a nice young person. I was a fairly good kid. I only got expelled from school 3 times, twice for fighting, both times because somebody had harmed an animal in my presence. So they had to die. And I gave it my best shot. And I got expelled for smoking in high school when I didn't smoke. There were some girls in the restroom. They were all smoking, and somebody said, "It's a teacher," and everybody ran around in circles. And somebody handed me the cigarette, and like a dummy, I stood there with it in my hand, like this way, vertical. The teacher came in, and I was the one caught with the cigarette, so I was the one in trouble. And here's the alcoholic brain that I have at work. On the way home that day, knowing I was going to catch hell from my parents, I said, well, I got the name, I'll play the game. And that night, I stole a pack of cigarettes from my mother's carton up on the fridge, because everybody smoked in those days. And I took it upstairs. I was 15. I opened the window, and I smoked that entire pack of cigarettes, one after another. The first time I didn't know about inhaling. The second cigarette, I learned how to hold it so I didn't look like an idiot. The third, fourth, fifth cigarettes, I perfected that laissez-faire. And then I learned to inhale. And by the time I was done with that pack, I was hooked on cigarettes, and I smoked for the next 20 years. And that's kind of the story of who I was and who I can be if I don't pay attention to what I'm doing in my life. I started drinking at 17, which is old by today's standards, but it was young by those standards. And I was in trouble right out of the gate. I wrecked the family car. And when the ambulance came to get me out of the car, I had flipped it end over end. And I was upside down, and the chassis, or whatever they call the bottom part of the car, had cracked into the gas tank. The gas was dripping down all the windows of the car. And they had to pry me out of the car. But while they were doing that, I was, of course, absolutely, totally drunk. Crawling around in the car, I had found a cigarette, and I was looking for a match. So that was one of the miracles. I've had a lot of miracles in my life, both when I was drinking and in sobriety, but that was one of them. Never did find that match. And I can still remember the look on my parents' face when they were in the hospital and they were sewing my lip up. that look of utter, what can we do? What happened to our daughter? Who is she? Who is she? What's going on? You know, I still remember the look all these years later. And at 21, I had just turned 21, so we're going 5 years down the road now. I was absolutely thrilled to be legal to drink. I had a good job. I was making money. I had got paid that day, the day that this next bit happens. And I came home from work that day and got all gussied up because I'd been out every night drinking since I turned 21 on the 8th. And my mother said to me, "Where are you going? Are you going out again? Are you going out?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going out." You know? And she said, "Well, this time, young lady, if you're not home by 11 o'clock tonight, don't come home." So I didn't go home for 11 years. And when I did, I took my 4 kids with me. My poor mother. Anyway, that night at 11 o'clock, I was sitting in a bar, I was drinking, and I flipped a coin. Heads, Denver, Colorado. Tails, Hotlanta, Georgia. And I sobered up on a bus in Tennessee the next day, heading south. That was the 22nd of February when I arrived there that year. The next day, I met the man I was going to marry on April 19th of that year. And part of my life up north, I had been a protester of the Vietnam War. I had been a protester and an activist in the civil rights movement. And I married a boy from Tennessee. Oh, I'm sorry, Mississippi. And his family going back had all fought in the Civil War on the other side. So our fights started almost immediately. And as the drinking progressed, they reached a place where the police were often called to settle our discussions. It became a very violent, crazy marriage, and the abnormal became the normal. It ended with a fist fight in the backyard. I had hidden the gun earlier because we were all drinking, and my brother and Mike, you know my brother, he was drinking then too, and he and my husband went outside, and the fist fight began, and you know the police were called, and so on and so forth, and that was the end of my marriage, you know. And I went to Savannah, Georgia, where my parents were living. I moved in downstairs in their house. They had what we called in Michigan a flat, upstairs and a downstairs. And my poor mother inherited me and my children in her very old age. And I'm sorry, I apologize to her still all the time. And she's been gone a while. That was a shock to her system, and I sure as hell wouldn't want to have that shock to mine. Because I'm now the age she was then. Anyway, the most wonderful thing to me about being divorced was all the booze in the house was now mine. That was important to me. I didn't have to share it with anybody, and I didn't. You know, I just sat in my little house and I drank every night, every single night. In the daytime, you know, I was out and about and doing stuff and had a job, had kids to raise, had all this stuff going on. And but at night, once the kids were in bed, that was my drinking time. And you'd be astonished how much booze you can pour down your throat in a few hours before I had to go to bed so I could get up the next day and do it all over again. But I had to drink, you know, I had to sleep. That was my sleeping potion, and that was my excuse. That was my excuse. I found a job with the local newspaper, Savannah Morning News and Evening Press. It was the second largest newspaper in the state. I was hired as the secretary in the newsroom. I had been a curator of a museum in North Georgia before my divorce, and I had written a local column for the local paper up there, so I thought, I could go in and become a reporter. However, when I got to that job, that was about the time that the journalists were coming in with degrees, and they didn't want to bring you up through the ranks anymore, like so many of the old timers there had been. But my editor, who became a very good friend of mine, city editor, the first woman city editor the paper had ever had in its 200-some-year history, she took a shine to me, and she decided to risk it, and she promoted me to the rank of junior reporter in the newsroom. And that's when I was 32 or 33 years of age. I was allowed to write obituaries at first. It's hard to screw up an obituary, I'm told. And then I got the municipality beat, which meant I got to go to all the little towns around Savannah and listen to all the mayors and city councilmen, with all their important issues. And then I got promoted to the military beat, and then I got promoted all the way up. And by the time I was 35, I had been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. I had won every award you could win in the state of Georgia for journalism, for investigative journalism. I'd won a couple of national awards, and I had won a worldwide award. And the only reason I'm telling you this, that was at the age of 35. That was when the second stage of alcoholism kicked in my life. And by the age of 37, my job was hanging by a thread. I was too unreliable. I was too sick to work a lot. The absenteeism was a threat. I was told one more fuck up and you're out of here. And I was terrified. I didn't know what was wrong. I knew I was on a toboggan to hell, but I didn't know how to get off of it. And then another series of miracles happened. I actually admitted to the priest of the church I went to that I thought I maybe had a problem with alcohol. Now, I was living in a small town. I went to church because it looked good. I was divorced. I had 4 children. Made me look good in the town. I didn't believe any of that crap in the church. None of it. I played the organ in the church. Didn't believe any of it. But my higher power sent me, which I did not know when I confessed to him that I had a problem, a priest who was the regional diocese expert on the problem of alcoholism in the clergy. So he knew something about this thing, right? First miracle. He brought me a copy of the big book to church in a brown bag, which I still think is funny. I read it like a novel. I identified with a couple things, but not a whole lot. Not really. I mean, that wasn't me, But I agreed with the priest that I would go to an AA meeting. So I did. And everybody knew who met at the church on a Sunday night. So I wasn't going to go to my church AA meeting. I would be seen. So I went to the next town over, and as it happened, the first, 6, 7 people through the door were all members of my church. I didn't know at the time that people went to different meetings, So that was that. And I will tell you about when I arrived at that meeting, I had no intention of staying. I went early. I hoped there would be some literature around that I could pick up to show the priest that I had actually been to the meeting. Okay. And I saw some brochures on a table, and I was looking at them, and this guy came out of the back room carrying a giant urn of coffee, that he put up on the thing. And he looked around and he saw me, and he was wearing overalls and a baseball cap. And he came bounding, and he had a couple tattoos, I think. He came bounding across the room and put out his hand. He says, "Hi, I'm Bill. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous." And I thought, kill me now. He was everything I was afraid Alcoholics Anonymous was going to be. As it turned out, Beale and his wife Linda and I became very, very good friends. And they're both gone now. They both passed away this past decade. But they died sober. And I will always miss them. They got me through those early days of recovery when it gets real crazy in there sometimes, you know. So I'm grateful to them. My city editor, by the way, and my friend, she ended up in AA 4 years after I got there. I became her sponsor. So that was another miracle, a miracle of friendship. Best friend I've ever had. You know, she passed away last summer. Excuse me. I was doing pretty good in AA the first 10 years. I was plugged in. I went to meetings. I was sponsored people. I had worked the steps. I did a lot of service work. I loved it. I loved AA. I was in it to win it, you know, and I was in it fully expecting to stay there doing just what I was doing without any problems at all. Just keep on doing what I was doing. I was told that. Just keep on doing what you're doing and you'll stay sober. So I kept on doing what I was doing. But around the 9th year, I started to notice that the women I sponsored, they were getting into good relationships. They were getting married. They were having children. They were going back to school and they were getting wonderful lives. And none of that had happened for me. And I wanted all of that. So watching this, I thought, well, I need to do more in AA. And I did. I plugged back in even more. I did another 4-step. I did another 5th step. I did all that. Everything I was told to do, I did. But I got more and more depressed and more resentful and more angry. And here's what I know about depression. I know Bill W. suffered from it for many years. And I know that there is such a thing as clinical depression. I've had it. It is not fun. But I also know that a lot of depression is a habit. It's a habit of thought. And once I started copying that resentment and having a habit of depression, it got worse. And it got worse. And it got worse. And in that same time frame, my mother died. My dad died. I went through the ending of an important relationship in my life. I had to leave a job that I loved for a number and variety of reasons. My 4 children all left home around that time. They were, you know, late teens, early 20s, and they didn't just move down the street. 2 of them went out to Seattle, Washington, which is just about as far away from Savannah as where my other 2 went, because they went to England and Ireland. So all of a sudden, I was sitting in my house. I had been the hub of a very busy family, and everything was gone. And I didn't know who the hell I was. I did not know. And I was going to, by that time, about 1 meeting a week, you know. I now go to about 6 or 7. But about that time, you know, I honestly did not think AA had anything left to teach me. I knew what the program was all about. I had worked this program. I understood this program. I was a star in this program. But I ended up suicidal with the depression and the resentment. My daughter was in Ireland. She was worried about me. She asked me to come and stay there. I thought, why not? I got nothing here. I went to Ireland. I arrived there just about the day she met the man she was about to marry a few months, a year later. And so she was in love. She wasn't home. So there I was in a cold water flat in Newbridge, Ireland, with no money to speak of, all by myself most of the time. So what was I going to do? Well, I went to meetings. I went to meetings, and Mossy, I got to tell you, when I got there, everybody there spoke like you did, and I didn't understand a word they said. So, so I was sitting in those meetings, and people would say stuff, and they'd laugh, and I would get so pissed off because I like a good laugh, and I didn't understand the joke, So I started listening. And I got the program all over again, and I got it better. But let me tell you how that happened. Because when I started going to those meetings in Newbridge, I was planning my suicide. And the only concern I had about it was I didn't want to leave my kids with the idea that I had done that, and leave them with the guilt that they might have, that they could have done more for me. So I decided I would go down to the train station one day and artfully fall in front of a train, trip, fall off the platform. That was my plan. And one night I went to one of the meetings that I was going to, and I was so angry and so tired of this living crap, that I left before the meeting was over. I just slammed out of the meeting and walked home. And I decided the next day I was going to go have a look at the train station. And the next morning I got my morning coffee, and I was standing there looking out the window, and it was snowing. And I saw this woman. My house was like right here, and this was the main road. And I saw this woman coming down the main road, and she turned on my street. And as she did, I recognized she was a woman from the meeting. And I knew she lived 2 miles from me, so I couldn't imagine what had brought her down there. But I also somehow knew she was coming to my door, and I was just like, shit. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to see anybody. Anybody here ever have isolation factors? I just didn't want it. I didn't want to. But sure enough, she walked up the door, knocked on my door, and I opened the door, and she came in, and I shut the door, and she had a bouquet in her hand of daffodils. And in Ireland and in England, they're sold tightly in bud. If you didn't know what they were, you wouldn't know what they were. But I did know what they were. And she handed them to me, and she said, I just thought I should come down here today and tell you that winter can be a very long time sometimes, but after winter always comes the spring. And I'm not a crying woman, but I burst into tears. And she hugged me, and we sat down, and we drank a lot of coffee, and we did a lot of talking. And it was like a boil had been lanced, and all the poison spilled out. And I started really hearing the message of Alcoholics Anonymous once again. And that's what we do for one another. We save each other's lives. We show up. We show up in ways that you would never think of. And she saved mine. She saved mine. And I have no doubt of that. And I'm so grateful to that because, and I heard this in a meeting once, I'm so glad, this was about somebody else, mind you, but this member said to that person, I'm so glad you didn't kill yourself when you were thinking about it because you would have killed the wrong person. Isn't that a lovely thought? That person did not kill themselves, and they had the chance to become the person their higher power meant for them to be. So powerful. This program is so powerful. I started learning what this program had to offer in Ireland. I ended up going back to the States. I'm still learning. I'm still learning all the time. This program, I'll never learn it all. It's not possible. And isn't that lovely? What a journey. What a journey to be on. All the things that come our way in this journey, all the miracles, little tiny ones, and giant ones, you know. And we learn to recognize them and we learn to be grateful for them. Really humbly grateful for those miracles. And I have them all the time, all the time. I said something earlier about being in the second stage of alcoholism. In the 1950s, I think it was, the American Medical Association said that this is a progressive terminal illness, alcoholism. The final stage, which is the third stage, you end up, alcoholism takes away everything you ever valued, everything you ever loved, and then it kills you. That's the outcome. There's no pill you can take, there's nothing else. It's still a fatal progressive illness. So we learn in here how not to die from it. And we learn that we don't drink and we don't have to drink. And at my very first meeting, somebody said that, you know, you don't have to drink anymore. And I was gobsmacked. Everyone I knew drank. My brothers drank, my parents drank, my friends drank, my neighbors drank, everybody drank. What a concept that I didn't have to drink. I was floored. But you don't have to drink. You really don't have to drink. It does nothing for you, really. It did in the beginning. It made me feel pretty and smart and all those things that it can do for you, but not by the end. By the end, I was puking every morning in the shower, you know, and wondering what the hell was wrong with me. That's where it took me. And it takes people even further than that, you know. I was drinking every day at the end. That's not a good place to be. That is not a good place to be. I didn't know I was an alcoholic when I got to AA, and I was in the second stage of this disease, which is not a good place to be. But the sad thing is I see newcomers coming in all the time right now, 44 years later, and they don't know they're an alcoholic. That's a shocking statistic. That is shocking to me. You know, Hollywood did a really good job of selling us on the last stage of this disease, which is where you're living in a box under the bridge somewhere, you know, drinking out of a paper bag. That's the last stage. You know, that's not the beginning. That's not where we all go out and party and have a good time and woohoo, you know. That's the first stage. It's progressive and it's lethal. And I hate this disease. I love alcoholics, but I hate this disease. I've seen too many people die from it, up close and personal, and it is ugly. It's an ugly, nasty death. Not anything I would wish on anybody. I wouldn't, well, I'm not going to get political here, but I wouldn't wish it on some people who are now in power in places. But anyway, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Anybody. Oh, when I was drinking, I don't know how much time I got left. When I was drinking, I used to sit in my little kitchen when the kids were asleep, and I would drink and make up my life. I would talk to people who weren't there. I knew they weren't there, but I was having a conversation anyway, you know. And I would imagine the great success I would have as a writer, as an author. I was going to be famous. I was going to be on the Johnny Carson show, you know. I have conversations with Johnny Carson. All of those kinds of things were part of my drinking. Didn't do any of them. I survived. Okay. Now, since I've been sober, I've lived in 5 states, 5 different countries. My sponsor says there's nothing to be proud of. It just shows I believed in the geographic cure. But still, there have been great adventures involved in those different places of living. I've written 8 books, and they've had, you know, some success. It never got me on the Tonight Show, but they've had some success. I've done well with that. I've had a lot of fun doing it. I've met a lot of nice people doing it. And the most recent one, and I know Carol's going to talk about it because she talks about it all the time, God bless her. I should hire her. The most recent one is, she's showing it to you right now. Sobriety is the title, and it came out last month. Now, I got to tell you a little bit about it because this is funny. All right, this is a funny story. When I started writing a blog about recovery during the COVID lockdowns. And a lot of people said it helped them. They enjoyed the blogs. So my brother, he talked me into compiling all those blogs into a book, which I spent all last year doing. It was a lot of work. And it's a good book. I'm a good writer. There's a lot of good stuff in there about staying sober through the holidays and birthdays and all kinds of stuff. And it's a good read. It'll never be conference approved literature because I swear all the time, and there's a lot of that in my book. But here's the funny part. Okay, when I first got sober, I did not like the big book. I thought the big book was old-fashioned, chauvinistic, bit boring, bit tedious. I didn't like it. I have come to like it. I've come to appreciate it. But one of my plans early on in my recovery, I was going to rewrite the big book. That was my plan. Thank God my higher power never gave me a block of time to start that project because I could have done irreparable damage by messing around with that particular God-given text. Okay, so, but I have written a couple books about recovery, and this latest one is an interesting thing. But here's where it gets funny. I'll show you this just if I can. This is one of my earlier books. Okay, and you can see the size of it. It's 300 and some pages, and the Sobriety book is about 517 pages. So I was expecting this book to arrive and be like about that thick. That's what I was expecting. And if I can lift it, this is what I got. A giant book. Looks like a New York City telephone book used to look like. So I was quite shocked when it arrived in the mail. But here's what happened. My 23-year-old grandson, who is a techie, and I am not, he's the one who did the uploading of this book to Amazon. He had to put it all into a format that they would take and publish. And he spent quite a bit of time on it, and I couldn't afford to pay him, but I baked him a lot of cheesecake. He likes cheesecake, so I kept him in cheesecake while he worked on this book. Off it went to Amazon. Some of my friends bought copies, and every one of them was telling me, God, okay, this is a big book, man. I can barely live. This is a big book. I heard that over and over. Now, in northern Portugal, we don't have overnight deliveries on things, okay? So it took about a week and a half for me to get a copy, and I was stunned. I was shocked. I was not only horrified, I was so disappointed. I thought, nobody's going to want a book this size, for God's, I didn't want to hurt my grandson's feelings. So I sat with it for a while, and I thought dark thoughts for a little bit. And then I thought, well, you know what? Okay, a lot of prayer went into this book. So if it's this size, it's probably supposed to be this size, whether you like it or not. And one of the things I know about my higher power, he's not afraid of tough love, and he's not afraid of poking a hole in your ego and you need it. All right, so I sat there with it, and my grandson came out, and he was thrilled with it. He's like, "Oh, Mima, it's fabulous. Look how nice. I love it. I love the picture you drew. Oh," he was waving it around. This is just such a one. And he said, and the best part is, it's just what you wanted. And I went, because he's 23 and I'll be 82, and there is sometimes a communication gap going on here. And I said, in what way, honey? And he said, because you said you wanted a bigger print, you wanted wide margins, you wanted lots of space, so if anybody wanted to highlight anything, there'd be plenty of room. And there it is. And I went, Yeah, that's where it is. And then after my grandson left, I said to my higher power, all right, I get it. I get it. You wouldn't let me rewrite the big book, but you gave me a damn big, big book. And that's what my higher power does to me. Absolutely. All the time. Pokes a hole in whatever I think I want and shows me what's really needed. You know, I just wouldn't recommend if you buy the book that you hold it over your head like your phone when you're reading at night, because if it drops on you, it's going to kill you. I'm pretty sure of that. Anyway, I think that's probably all I got to say about this. Or I could talk for the rest of the night, which, I'm not going to do. I will say that the best day of my life was the day I walked into my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Absolutely the best day of my life. And I've learned a lot of stuff there. The most important thing is that my sobriety is the most important part of my life. The most important. The old timers used to say, you want to know what the cost of taking another drink is? I'll tell you what it is. When you go in the bar, put your car keys up on the bar. Put your mortgage for your house up on the bar if you got a mortgage. Put your marriage license up there because your marriage isn't going to last. Put your kids up there because they're going to leave. Everything that matters to you will be gone if you pick up another drink. And my higher power gave me the certainty, and this was a miracle and it was a gift. In my first year of sobriety, I left some meeting with the conviction that I had used up all my luck drinking, that I had driven way too many times with one eye so that I could stay inside the yellow line on the road. I had put my kids at risk by having blackouts and falling asleep with a lit cigarette in my mouth. All that luck was gone, and I knew it. I knew it in my soul. And that was a gift from my higher power. The best gift this program has ever given my children was a sober mom. And I'm grateful for that every day. If you haven't been here very long, keep coming back. You just barely touched it. You just barely got a little glimpse of it. It is so wonderful. This is such a gift. This is such a miracle. It's just the best thing that could ever happen to anybody, never mind an alcoholic. You're gonna go to a lot of meetings, but you're probably not gonna meet too many people who love this program as much as I do. But I hope that you become one of them. And I think that's all I got, Mossy. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Okay. Great to hear you. You hit on a lot of stuff there, but one of the things that really stood out was you came to a stage in sobriety where you wanted to kill yourself. And that hit me when I was 10 years sober. And it hit me so bad, after my mother passed, I could accept her death and everything that went with that, but what I couldn't accept was the only person that never let me down in my life was gone. And I figured the only way that I'd survive was to lie with her. So I planned my own demise. And one of the things that stopped me was my life insurance policy. I made an amendment to the policy over a year before that, and it wouldn't cover suicide until the policy was 2 years old. So I was good with the fact that I had my checkout date. And I continued on with that, and I couldn't let anybody know what was going on in my head. I couldn't open up to anybody. And I was walking into the graveyard one day with a friend of mine, and he said something to me. Now, for the life of me, I do not know what he said to me. But it was like the switch was turned on, you know what I mean? And I just, and I like what you said there. I would have been killing the wrong person.
Yes.
There's other people who were saved because I was saved. And just this meeting, for example, should never have started. It would never have started if I had lost my life that time. And I was talking to somebody downstairs earlier on. We're at a convention in Galway. And they're kind of non-believers of Zoom because it doesn't work. And I said to him, well, that was my belief as well. This Zoom lark didn't work. And I knew for a fact before I even started the meeting that it wasn't going to work. And I said to him, well, we've had over 230,000 people through the room in the last 5 years. He said, what? I said, 230,000 people have been through this room that we're inside here this evening. That was the last time I'd done the figures was in March. And that's as a result of the fact that Jimmy Hickey 12-stepped me. And I'd be forever grateful for the old timers. And you know, the reason I do this meeting, the reason I wanted the old timers meeting, is that I'd give anything to hear Jimmy Hickey's voice. But I'll never hear it again. But you know, the likes of Mick the Ferret and yourself and myself, when we're all gone, it will be left behind for others to listen to if they wish. I love being part of the old timers. I love the friendships that I've gained inside in this fellowship, and the solid love that I have for people on this, on this platform here. I had the privilege of being with Mick the Ferret the day he was 50 years sober, and they tried to kill me that night then, but we'll say nothing about that. Yeah, I love to have a laugh as well.
Yeah.
Anyone that's struggling, hang in there for one more day. Because it just takes one more day for the light to shine on you. And I believe that it does. I love being sober, absolutely love being sober. Mick?
Thank you, Mossy. Okay, Jackson, fantastic. I loved it. I identified with the early bits, that, I came for the wrong reasons into Alcoholics Anonymous to get my wife off the back, and I used to think, what would I do if my children died? And I thought to myself, and then I thought, they'd be in heavens looking down and saying, look what we've done to Dad. Look what we've done. And from that, the worst thing in my life I could ever do is take a drink. That's the worst thing that, because most of in my recovery, things have happened and I've not needed, like my wife dying, she was my soulmate, but I didn't take a drink, and when people say to me, what do you love about AA? I love it all. It gave me a life. See, I went back as a child and saw what I was like as a child. I was a troublemaker. People say to me sometimes, "What do you get your mum for Christmas?" And I said, "Trouble." That's all I ever brought in our house was trouble. And like you, I blamed everyone and everything around me, and it was me. And I learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned who I was, what I was, and where I came from. And that is all part of my history today. And I'm proud of it because it's got me to where I am now. Without a drink, My sister was dying and she was a kind girl. And she said to me, "Why is God punishing me? I've never hurt anyone in all my life." And I was at the side of her bed, and this came into my head. I said, if God came in this room now and said to you, "I've got to take somebody, your daughters, your son, what would you say to him?" And she said, "Take me." And a couple of days later, she died, and she died peacefully. And you people of Alcoholics Anonymous has shown me. You've carried me at many times. There's a poem, Footsteps in the Sand. And I didn't really understand it until when things happened to me in AA, and the members carried me. I didn't know until I look back, as time goes past, what AA has done for me. And I'm very pleased to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and an alcoholic. I said to a member once when I was in my drinking in AA, why me? Why me, an alcoholic? And he just said to me, why not? What's so special about you anyway? These old timers, they knew how to make it sink in. We've come to the end of the meeting, and Jason is going to do the promises.
I am Jason, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jason.
If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which choose to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. All these extravagant promises, we think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
Thanks, Jason. Karen for timekeeping. Jason and Carol, was it for the preamble?
Yeah.
Thanks for the co-host. Thanks, Mick, for joining me. And of course, okay, thank you. I need a bit of proof that you're 82 because I don't believe it.
Want it in writing.
Yeah, I want to see a letter from your mother or something to say and that's it. That's it from me. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And take it away, Mick.
A reminder that we have a meeting on 7 days a week at 8:30 a.m. UK time. We also have a lunchtime meeting every Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time. This is a meditation meeting. And of course, Saturdays we have our old timers meeting, an extended share recorder for our archives, and Thursday evenings we have a meeting at 7:30 p.m. UK time. We use the same meeting codes for all our meetings. Stick around for fellowship after this meeting. If you want a breakout room after the meeting, please ask the host. And the yellow card. Who you see here? What you hear here. When you leave here. Let it stay here. And that's a wrap, guys. All we've got to do it now. We'll get okay to lead us out with the serenity prayer. And thanks, everybody. Thanks again, okay, for your fantastic share this evening. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I got to tell you, Maggie, a coincidence is just God winking at you. All right. Who makes the stars and keeps us out of bars? God?
God
Grant
us the serenity to accept the things that cannot change,
courage
to change that can,
and
wisdom
to know
to know the difference.
Bless you all.